Welcome to another episode of Building Educator Capacity, where we strive to improve student learning by expanding the capacity of our school districts. I'm joined by my co-host, Phil Anderson.
Always happy to be here. Be sure to check out part 1 of this conversation, where we talked about positive emotions and engagement for our students.
Indeed, this is a part 2 conversation with Dr. Valerie Schmitz and Katie Curran of Proof Positive. In this episode, we'll dive into the relationship between educator and student.
Thank you once again to Miss Liz Elliott from Whitewater Middle School for providing the music for this podcast.
Let's move to relationships. And, when I was a teacher, mission critical, the relationships that students had with at least one adult in the building. And that was something that we strive for, and certainly with each other. But can you talk a little bit about how relationships are meaningful in the lives of our learners and educators?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that kids who have one abiding adult in their life do significantly better. So one of the first things I always ask schools to do that I'm partnering with is just begin to get a pulse on how connected your students feel. So send out a student survey that directly asks the question, do you believe there is one adult in this building who cares about you and your well-being?
Mm-hmm.
That's a powerful question. It also says to teachers, this is sort of where we are. We're coming in at 72%. We want to be at 100%. We're coming in at 90%. We want to be at 100%, right? So start with some baseline feedback because it's so important. And then the question is, how do we help build trust with kids, right? So that they know that we're there for them. My favorite work and skill in this, I teach a couple of skills around relationship building, but my favorite is the work of Shelley Gable. She's at UCLA, and she asked the question, will you be there for me when things go right? So she wanted to know what shifts in relationships when we celebrate the good times together, and how do we do that as humans? How do we respond when people share good news with us? So if you're lucky, your students share good news with you frequently because they've learned that you're going to be happy for them, right? Whether they won their soccer game the night before or they did well on a test in another class. If you're in relationship with your students, chances are they're sharing some bits of good news for you. You might have to elicit it. Shelley's research tells us this. As humans, there are 4 ways we tend to respond to one another's good news. 3 of those ways deteriorate and kill relationships. And 1 way builds trust and belongingness. Right. We're all like, why did no one teach us this when we were in grade school?
Yeah, exactly.
No one, right? We could go like have the divorce rate. Mm-hmm. So her research has showed this, right? Marriages that are thriving and flourishing, her research started in marriages. It has expanded to cover lots of different types of relationships. Mm-hmm. The defining characteristic in good relationships happen to be whether the couple showed up for each other in their good news. So I'll walk you quickly through the 4 style, and then I can send you a link for some stuff for folks to read.
Sure.
The first of the 4 ways that we respond to good news, passive constructively. So someone comes to you, they share good news. They pick you as their person to share their little, win with, their gift of joy. So, your son or daughter comes home, Mom, Dad, look, I got a 92 on my math test. Awesome, happy for you.
Mm-hmm.
Good job. Passive constructive. The conversation ends. The kid is left confused. They're not sure why you're not more excited. It didn't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Squashes relationships. Passive destructive. Your son walks in, daughter walks in. Mom, Dad, look, I got a 92 on my math test. Hey, Jimmy, do you have your shin guards? Aren't we late for soccer practice?
Yeah.
You miss the good news altogether and you change it to something else. This can also take the form of sort of one-upping. Hey, Mom, Dad, look, I got a 92 on my math test. And a sibling walks in, I got 100 on my spelling test, right? So we've now one-upped the good news. You shift the focus to yourself. Oh, that reminds me, I wanted to tell you my good news, right? So we all do all of these styles. Those of you listening are going to start to feel a sense of guilt as you reflect on the times you've done this to people you love, you're also going to quickly think about the people in your life that do these different styles to you. All of it's okay because you will get better now that you know this skill. The third, probably most toxic response style to good news is active destruction. So someone chooses you, they share their good news with you, and you actually point out flaws in it.
Oh,
Mom, Dad, look, I got a 92. A 92? What'd you get wrong? I thought we studied. Let me see what's wrong. Right. So you're pointing out what's wrong in the good news.
right.
A lot of times when people share good news with us, it's a vulnerable place to be. They're feeling good.
Mm-hmm.
Joy, George Valiant, one of my favorite professors in pos psych, says that joy is the most vulnerable of all human emotions because when you're feeling good, they're so far to fall.
Oh, wow. That's
So
beautiful.
when someone brings you their gift of joy,
Yeah.
and you point out the flaws, what's wrong with it, you're critical of it,
Mm-hmm.
you're really squashing that joy for them. All right, so those are the three wrong ways to respond to someone's good news. They all hurt
A good
relationships.
one. What's the right one?
Yeah, the right one. Active constructive. So when somebody chooses you, they bring you their good news, you're going to dive in. You're putting away your cell phone, the email. You're going to ask some questions. You're going to show authentic interest in their good news. You are going to have them relive the experience. So her research shows that when we show up actively and constructively to someone's good news, we not only give them a boost to their well-being, we get a boost to our well-being as well. So this response style helps both people, builds trust in the relationship.
Mhm.
If we want people to rely on us when things go wrong, we have to be there for them when things go right. So, Mom, Dad, I got a 92 on my math test. Oh, no way. Let me see. What did the teacher say when she gave it back to you? How do you feel about this 92? Wow, you worked really hard to learn how to do it, right? You can praise the process,
Mhm.
bring in a little growth mindset. I saw you really study this concept. I'm glad it paid off and your hard work paid off. So you can get into the good news, unwrap it with them, help them explore it, active constructive responding. And when you get kids doing that with one another, when you get the celebration of good news at the forefront of your classroom, guess what that serves as? Your quickest way to a jolt of joy at the beginning of class. Hey
Mm.
guys, turn to one another, share one thing that went well this week. And everyone in the class is trained in active constructive responding so the kids are going to get the response they need. And particularly with high schoolers, we'll make sure to actually say, and don't forget, this isn't a time to be too cool to dive in. This is a time to practice that skill we learned, active constructive responding. And so you'll just see the energy in a classroom balloon up when kids are sharing and responding to each other's good news. So
I
we
love
come
that.
full circle to positive emotions.
I love that. And don't be, it's, what, I don't know exactly what you said. Don't be too cool to not share your
Yeah,
jolt of
like dive in.
especially with middle and high school students, I think too. One of the quotes around relationships, this is on your website. So the quote, he explains the research on pain centers in the human brain, and this was fascinating to me. And what he says was basically our pain centers become activated when we are at risk of isolation. From an evolutionary perspective, isolation is the worst thing we could do for survival. And I think about those students who do seem to be isolated, who don't have those positive relationships, who may be experiencing bullying or just that feeling of alone, and how painful that is. But also, he talks about that as being the worst thing we can do for survival. So that relationships, in terms of the PERMA, is really a critical element of the framework.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to sell it as the most critical when I'm training teachers. I will share a story that I think sort of speaks to that. One of the first teachers to really push back and be like your grandpa in a training was an AP physics teacher at the high school level. This was
Mm,
6 years ago.
mhm,
And he just could not understand why he was being asked to give up AP physics time for happiness.
mm,
But the one thing that I was able to sort of coach him to do was to create a Google Drive where his students could share anything good that was going on in their life.
mhm,
And one of his students, and that could be a place where on his own time he could respond with active constructive responding, right? He could, if somebody posted something, he could respond back. He didn't have to take class time away. And a student posted that his good news was that he had played ping pong in the basement the night before. And this teacher said, oh, ping pong is like one of my favorite things. My brother and I played all the time in our garage growing up. Who do you play with? Active constructive responding. Great question. And the kid wrote back, I don't have anyone to play with.
Hmm.
I fold the table in half. Well, that teacher decided that every Friday afternoon moving forward, he was going to set up a ping pong table in the global
Mm.
commons and play with the kid. Well,
Mm.
sure enough, he saved that kid from the isolation of having no friends, not having siblings at home. And he would have never known had he not created this space
Mhm.
for kids to just share sort of some personal stuff with him. And I think that's the point, right? Like if we can get kids talking to us, then we can know what they actually need from us, and it's much easier to meet their needs. They all need relationships. Some get it from their peers, some get it from their families. The ones we have to identify are those that are getting it from nowhere and they really need it from their school community. And that's easier said than done. But creating places for kids to open up and share. And I've had quite a few of my positive education leaders this year in a virtual setting where they felt like they just weren't going to be able to get to know kids in the same way, create online journals where kids could literally journal to them about anything. It could be nothing. It could be, I'm really struggling at home. I'm in an unsafe environment. Please help me. So that, teachers have gotten everything from silly stuff about TV shows to, I really need your help. Please
Yeah.
help. And I think creating that space is really important.
And for our teachers too, right? I know just as an adult human myself, when I feel like I don't have that person or somebody to, to be there for me, I think about what it means professionally. And we think about the teachers that have colleagues who are important to them, who they collaborate with. That for a school leader is a very important element to build as well.
Absolutely. I mean, just from I mean, really across PERMA, right? If you go to work and you're connected and you're related and you've got people you can rely on and people you love collaborating with,
Mhm.
you're really going to experience just a wholly different environment than if you go to work and sort of stick to yourself and you're isolated. So similarly at home, and as we're in these virtual communities, like how can school administrators create ways for their staff and their teams to connect in meaningful ways? I will say that when I start with schools, my primary focus, typically for the first year, I ask schools to commit 1 year of professional development to staff well-being.
Mm.
Then I'm going to train the science and skills of PERMA, but that there is zero expectation that those teachers will go and implement anything in the classroom in year one. That what we want them to do is learn how to live the skills in their own life and connect better with each other and increase staff well-being. Because how can we ask teachers, and we know nationally that teacher job satisfaction is trending in the wrong direction. Teachers are being asked to do more with less resources, test more, with less autonomy. So it's
Right.
teacher job satisfaction isn't going the right direction. So if we want to have a meaningful, impactful conversation about student well-being, we absolutely have to, no questions asked, start with staff well-being and get a team of teachers feeling really good
Mhm.
so that they can go implement these skills.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'm going to transition to the M of PERMA, and the question that you ask here is very thoughtful as well. It says having an answer as to why are we on this earth is a key ingredient that can drive us towards fulfillment. Can you talk about what meaning represents in our schools?
Yeah, so I think those of us that feel sort of connected to serving a larger purpose tend to fare better in relationships and with well-being and all aspects related to doing well and thriving. So what does that mean and how do we that's a huge question, right? How do we help people sort of find their purpose? There's a great book called The Power of Meaning, which can actually help sort of break down the pillars of meaning. I think one really important place to start is to help teachers and then students develop like what is their personal mission statement. So we know companies and organizations have mission statements. They keep employees and organizations moving towards a purpose or a larger mission.
Mhm.
Many of us go through life never really sitting down and taking the mental time to think about what is our personal mission statement? What is our personal purpose on this earth? What are we working towards? And when you're able to do that, then you can start to identify like where you're spending your time. Are you spending time on things that are mission driven for you? Are you spending time on things that help you connect to your greater purpose?
Mhm.
So for me personally, when I went through this exercise, and you can really Google personal mission statement and you'll find lots
Yeah.
of examples of 12-step processes, 5-step. Just give it, if you create the space and time. So I landed on my personal mission being to cultivate growth wherever I go through joy.
Mm.
So I aim, whether I'm working with teachers or I'm working individually with a student, or I do some work in the autism world. I'm working with special needs populations or families. So long as I feel that I am cultivating growth through joy, I know that I am connecting to my greater purpose on this earth. And
Mhm.
you can't know that until you
Mhm.
connect. So sometimes, the work might look different, but as long as I'm working towards that mission, I feel much better. So I challenge every teacher to write their own personal mission statement. And then it's a really cool exercise at the beginning of a school year to have a class work to write a class mission statement. Like, who do we want to be as a class? What's our guiding sort of
Right.
North Star? And
Mhm.
then have students that are old enough. I mean, I think, kindergartners might be a little young for this exercise.
Mhm.
Though, you could help them think like maybe their purpose is to be kind to their friends. Maybe their
Mhm.
purpose is to play and be mindful, right? So we can talk about what is the purpose of a kindergartner.
Mhm.
But certainly by the time they're in high school, kids should be giving some thought to
Yeah.
what their greater purpose on this earth is.
Yeah, I love that, and tying it not just to the classroom, but, your purpose,
Yeah,
and hopefully those 2 align.
yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
Let's talk about the A, the final letter in PERMA, accomplishments. And you say having accomplishments in life is important to push ourselves to thrive and flourish. So, what do accomplishments look like in our schools with our learners and teachers?
Yeah, so it's funny. I tend to tell people I'm going to spend the least amount of time on the A because I think as Americans, we spend way too much time on the A. There's actually a counseling department in a high school I work with that got notepads printed with perma at the top of
Mm.
all of the sheets of paper so that when they sit down with kids, particularly that are thinking about college planning and post-secondary life, they actually just cross out the A and they
Oh,
tell the kids like they're not willing to talk about the accomplishments because what they really want to know is how they're doing in the rest of their life, and then the accomplishments will follow. Like
sure.
as Americans, we're a little overdriven by grades and these sorts of measures. But
Mhm.
what I will say is, as teachers and as students, having a set of goals, having a vision for your future, and knowing sort of where you want to get and feeling optimistic about getting there, really important. So we can start with SMART goals,
Mhm.
but I actually really like Snyder's work on hope theory and sort of blending goal setting, Ryan Adici's work with Snyder's work on hope theory. So hope theory looks at how likely we are to accomplish those goals based on sort of how hopeful we are about them. And he tells us that there's two types of thinking that are critical to goal accomplishment.
Mhm.
One is agency thinking. So you can set a SMART goal. Let's say I want to save $10,000 over the next 5 years, right? That's a SMART goal. It's action focus, it's time bound, it's specific.
Right.
But if the very first thought that pops into my head is, there's no way I'm saving 10 grand, right? Like, what is the likelihood I'm going to work towards that goal, that I'm going to be action focused? Very low. Agency thinking, you can think of as like you're getting started thinking that once you set a goal, you need to be tuning into that voice in your head and you want it to sound like almost like bumper stickers of optimism. Like, I
Mhm.
know I can do it. I can get started. I'm going to start this right now. Right? Agency is getting action focused. The next is pathways thinking.
Mm.
So people who are going to be more likely to accomplish a goal take the time to visualize multiple pathways to the same goal
Mhm.
and consider the barriers that could come up on each pathway so they create workarounds. So I think in schools, we're getting much better about helping kids think about SMART goals. Like SMART goals have been sort of a buzzword for a moment now, at least here in New Jersey, where I do a lot of work.
Very much
But
so.
the idea of teaching kids to think about their thinking about their goals. Do
Mhm.
they believe? Are they optimistic about their goal? Do they see lots of pathways? Are they able to identify potential barriers and workarounds? Now we're working towards goal accomplishment, not just goal setting, and that will boost the A if that's what you're after, and boosting your personal well-being.
I love that. I think we see a lot of that in project-based learning, standards-based grading, so that students have options to demonstrate their accomplishment in a number of different ways.
Love that. Yeah.
Wonderful. So, Katie, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your research on PERMA. For our listeners, for our schools, these are incredibly challenging times. And I would propose pre-COVID is also a very challenging time, and post-COVID will definitely be as well. So we hope that you're able to take elements of PERMA and the research and thoughts that Katie has shared today into your work in our schools.
I hope that people learn something sort of practical that they can put into action. I would close by saying if you've listened this far and you've stuck with us, do a simple exercise for me. On a piece of paper or in the notes section on your phone, just write out the letters for PERMA. P for positive emotion, E for engagement, R for relationships, M for meaning, A for accomplishments. For each element of PERMA, I want you to just get a sense of where you are right now. So, on a scale of 0 to 10, put a number next to each element of PERMA. How much positive emotion have you experienced in the last week? Have you been feeling a bit blue? You might be a 2 or 3. Have you been, having a ton of fun and you're going into break and things have been good? Might be a 10. Do the same for each engagement. How captivated by the things you've been doing have you been versus sort of bored? How enthusiastically are you getting out of bed and getting to work versus not? 0 to 10. Relationships. How connected do you feel? 0 to 10. Personal and professional. Think about sort of your relationships over the last week. How are things going? Same for meaning, same for accomplishment. That is your well being dashboard. You can stop, you can pause, and you can get a read on how you're doing on the elements that matter most to your well being at any given time. Perma dashboard can be anywhere in any space, anytime. Create that space for yourself. Keep an eye on your perma dashboard. If you're like every human I've ever interacted with, at any point in time, some of the elements will be high, some will be low. My goal is to help people not feel stuck. So no matter what your dashboard says, we can refuel your tank, we can speed you up, we can get you feeling better. You should have some tools. So just today, you learned create a list of jolts of joy, quick ways to induce positive emotion, connect with people through active, constructive responding, celebrate people's good news. And I'll leave you with this if you do nothing else for your well being, practice gratitude.
Mm.
Stop every day and write down 3 things that went well. Ask yourself the question, what went well? Every day, for as long as you possibly can, start asking your students instead of how was your night? How was your weekend? What went well last night? What went well this weekend? You will be training their brains to practice gratitude, really, really powerful skill, and actually boost all 5 elements of PERMA. So, my closing thoughts are thank you for listening. I really hope that you got something good out of this. And keep an eye on your well being because through these trying times, it's more important than ever that you act on your own well-being and that you have some tools to do so.
Wonderful. Katie, thank you so much for your time. And to our listeners, thank you for listening and sticking with us. Best on your journey to be jolts of joy, and may your dashboards be plenty. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's amazing how eye-opening simple baseline feedback could be by asking our students, do you believe there's at least one adult in the building that cares about your well-being? Great point by Katie Curran.
For sure. And the other 2 parts of PERMA, meaning and accomplishments, those 2 yet big ideas to give purpose to what you do. Having that purpose, I think, gives those positive emotions we want our students to have. And not only for our students, but also for ourselves.
Thank you for joining another episode of Building Educator Capacity. To view any links or resources mentioned in this podcast, be sure to check out our website, cisa2.org, or expand the podcast episode description.
Join us next time for an overview of the ATLC, where Donna Hudson from CISA 2 and Katie Buse from Tobii Dynavox will tell us about the importance of AAC technologies and how to try them out.
Thanks, everybody.